Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the North Central Texas Small Business Development Center webinar series. My name is Paula McCain. I'm a recovery business advisor for the North Central Texas Small Business Development Center. Today is National Meatball Day and National Barbie Day, and I have no idea how to celebrate those. The SBDC is the leading provider of assistance for small businesses. We are grant funded, and because of that, we can bring our resources and our assistance to you at no cost. Today's webinar is brought to you because we are grant funded. Today's presentation is called Hiring Smart by CJ Pettit. Please put any of your questions in the chat room and CJ will get to them throughout the presentation. So CJ, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am hoping that this information will empower and strengthen small businesses and give them a starting point for being able to, one, hire their first employee, and two, understand what their pitfalls are and how to avoid them. And so that's really the gist of today's session. And I just want to say that I'm not just a presenter, I'm also a client. When I went to start my business 10 years ago, I went to SBDC and got an advisor, and I still meet with my advisor to this day. She is literally why I'm still in business. I used to give her name out, but then everybody started getting on her calendar, and so I was like, got a little jealous. So I don't give her name out, but I just want to say that if you have not signed up to be an SBDC client, do it now. It is paid for with your tax dollars, and your advisor, it could be critical in you either launching your business or learning how to navigate some of the pitfalls that happen while you're in business. So highly encourage you to use this. If you see this presentation on YouTube, if you don't have an advisor, go to the website and check it out, or give them a call and get signed up ASAP. So what we're going to talk about today, again, is we're going to talk about some of the legalities of hiring. We're going to talk about do's and don'ts, and then I'm going to give you a little secret sauce for starting your first policies. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to show some, provide you with some samples. And by the way, if you would like copies of these samples, the presentation is going to be on YouTube. But if you would like copies of the samples, sign up, get an advisor, and then they can provide these to you at no cost. So just want to throw that out there, that I'll share them with you at the end of the presentation. But to get a copy, you can go to the website and get more information. So what we're going to talk about today is really very specific for small business. What I see a lot of people do is when they start their business, they just use their handbook from their last employer, and then they wonder why they're so confused, because they come from corporate America to starting their own business, and they're just two separate beasts. And so what I'm encouraging you to do with this presentation is really to ditch the corporate handbook that you have from your last job and really start to learn to think like the small business that you are or that you would like to be. These are the things we're going to talk about: key policies, payroll, pitfalls, and then some secret sauce at the end. So,
Hey, CJ,
yes,
have you shared your screen?
yes.
Okay, we're not seeing it.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me just see if I thought I had already shared it. Can you see it now?
Yeah, there you go.
I apologize. I thought I had already shared it and it had stayed. So I'll back up a little bit here and go. This is the website that you need to reach out to get help and get samples, sign up to get an advisor. I apologize. I shared my screen earlier and I thought I was still sharing. So again, we're going to talk about how small business needs to do HR, not corporate America, but small business. And we're going to talk about key policies, pitfalls, and then again, some secret sauce. So a little bit about me is that I actually have over 20 years of experience in HR. I've spent the last year dedicated to my passion, which is helping small businesses in their HR. One of the reasons why I am able to help small businesses because I started my career with Texas Workforce Commission, so I kind of learned from the inside out how to protect your business and the pitfalls to avoid. And I just put in here that I'm a Sooner. I graduated from OU. Don't hate me for it, but I had to throw that in there. My disclaimer is that I'm not an attorney, and I'm a creative person, so I have to put in at least one sideways slide. But what this says is that I'm not an attorney. I can't give legal advice. So what I'm giving you really is just practical information that is boiled down for you. So here's maybe a surprise for you. A lot of small businesses are afraid of getting sued for discrimination, uh, disability discrimination, age discrimination. They worry about FMLA or they have FMLA in their handbook. But here's the deal, is that Title VII doesn't kick in until you have 15 employees. Now, I'm not encouraging you to discriminate, but if you've got, say, 5 employees, then Title VII doesn't apply. And Title VII is we won't discriminate based upon race, religion, national origin, and that kind of thing. So Title VII is the mama of all employment laws and doesn't start until 15. ADA 15, ADEA, which is age discrimination, is 20, COBRA 20, FMLA 50, and then also the Affordable Care Act doesn't kick in until 50 employees. So if you are a mom and pop with 5 employees, this is not your main liability. This is not where you need to be spending your time focused on avoiding liability. So, I'm not encouraging you to discriminate by any means, but what I'm saying is that small businesses can still get sued, and your employees are the face of your business. And good employees can make your business, and bad employees can break your business. So it's important for you to understand how to protect your business regardless of when the employment laws kick in. You need to be savvy on what does apply to you. Now, the main law that applies to everyone is called Fair Labor Standards Act. And the main thing about this, there's two things that are important about this law for small business. One is that it does overtime provisions. And so overtime is any hours worked over 40 hours in a work week has to pay time and a half. So what I find small businesses doing is paying on a bi-weekly basis and then averaging hours. So maybe one week your employee works 35 hours and the next week they work 45. So you just average those and pay them 80 straight hours. And that is illegal. A lot of small businesses do that. If an employee works over 40 hours in any one work week, they are owed the overtime. Even if they work less the week before or the week after, you can't average it. If it's over 40 hours in a work week, then it has to be paid at time and a half. Also, just remember, this is some secret sauce, is that you can determine your work week. So if your busiest day of the week is on Friday, then you may look at setting your work week to be like Monday through Sunday or Tuesday through Monday, because then when employees start bumping up and getting close to 40 hours a week or going over, then you can go ahead and send them home on your slower days, as opposed to trying to send them home on a day that's always going to be your busiest day of the week. When you have a busy day, you're just going to do what you need to do and keep your employees there working to keep your customers happy. So you determine your work week. And so think that through. What's to your advantage when it comes to controlling overtime cost? The other thing that FLSA does is it determines who's eligible to be on salary. I see a lot of businesses just put everyone on a salary because it's predictable labor costs, but not everybody qualifies to be on a salary. The technical terms are exempt and non-exempt. Exempt means somebody who is exempt from overtime compensation. Non-exempt means that they have to be paid overtime. And a lot of times it gets mixed up with like a salaried person. So typically, if you have a salaried person, they just work whatever hours they need to work to get the job done. And typically that's going to be an exempt position. An hourly person is someone that when they kick over 40 hours, they're going to get the overtime compensation. So I just want to say that not everybody is allowed to be on a salary. So for example, a lot of businesses will put their administrative assistants on a salary, but the law says that really the only administrative assistant type position that's allowed to be on salary is an executive assistant. So if you're out putting all of your invoicing clerks, your administrative assistants, your administrative staff on salary, and you're not paying them overtime, then you're breaking the law. And so what I tell people is that unless you are very clear on who is eligible to be exempt, meaning salaried and that they don't get paid overtime, then hire them on an hourly basis, because that is one of the number one pitfalls that small businesses get dinged for, is that they're not paying overtime to people. They want to put everybody on a salary and they're not paying overtime to people to whom it's owed. And it gets very expensive if you get caught by the Department of Labor. So the next thing I want to talk about is audits. The main way that people get audited is that they hire everybody as a contractor, and then when the job's done, the contractor files for unemployment. And TWC will look and say, wait a minute, I know you hired this person as a contractor, but we're looking at their job description and they should have been an employee and you should have been paying taxes on them, payroll taxes. And what happens is that you end up with owing back taxes, penalties, fees, interest. It can literally put someone out of business if it goes that way. And so all it takes is one unemployment claim to get all of your employees called into question and audited to make sure that you're not putting people on contract who should really be an employee. So I put some links here, but I'm going to share with you at the end of the presentation, if you just want to hang tight, a checklist that's like a cheat sheet for you that'll help make it a lot easier for you to figure out who can be considered a contractor. So workers' compensation, believe it or not, Texas is the only state that does not require workers' compensation. You don't have to have it. It doesn't matter if you've got 1 employee or 100 employees. You do not have to have workers' compensation in the state of Texas. But if your employees get hurt, you're going to be responsible for their medical fees and you can get sued. So I'm not a big fan of going without workers' compensation. If you are not sure about how much it's going to cost you, just reach out to your insurance agent. What happens is they look at the different types of jobs that you have and they assign a job code to each position. And I want you to take a very close look at that because sometimes people are miscoded. So let me give you an example. An administrative assistant is typically coded to 8810, 8810. That is a very inexpensive code. It's low risk, right? But sometimes your agent or your insurance carrier will go in and assign the wrong codes to your employees and you end up paying more because of that. So number one, I want you to talk to your insurance agent about how much it would cost you to get workers' compensation because it could be pennies on the dollar. It doesn't have to be expensive. I want you, whether or not you are looking or you already have workers' comp, I want you to look at the codes that they're using to bill your employees to make sure those codes are correct. Because sometimes people, an administrative assistant might be accidentally coded to being a salesperson who does driving, and you'll end up paying a lot more for that job code than an administrative assistant or a receptionist that answers the phones. You can pay annually, meaning that you pay once a year for your workers' compensation, or you can pay as you go. Some businesses, what they do is they basically they run their payroll reports and then they pay their carrier the exact hours that are on the payroll report. When you pay annually, sometimes you overestimate or underestimate, and that can cause you some heartburn at the end of the year because if you underpay in the beginning, then they're going to want to collect that money after the fact. So talk to your agent. Don't just say, I don't need workers' compensation, so I'm not going to get it. One time I had an employee who, a client who worked with aggressive animals, and one of her employees got bit. She wasn't following proper procedure, but still, it was very expensive because she had to, go to the ER and therapy, and that came straight out of that small business's pocket because they didn't have workers' compensation. And so I want to encourage you to check it out and make sure, if you want to go without it, make sure that you know what you're doing. Because one of the advantages of signing up for workers' compensation is that your employees can't sue you. When they get hurt, it's a no-fault system. Workers' compensation pays, and the employee loses the right to sue you. And so just be aware that sometimes what you can do isn't necessarily what you should do. The Affordable Care Act is another law that applies to small businesses in one way, and that is you have to provide a model notice to all of your employees. And so I put a link here for the model notices. If whether or not you provide insurance to your employees, you still have to provide them with the information. Also, going back to workers' compensation, here's a form that is required by the state of Texas. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I provided the link to it, and I also have it on a orientation checklist for you, so to help remind you to include both of these documents for new hires. If you have over 10 employees, and you are required to do record keeping, there are some exceptions. So like if you are an engineer or an architect, you may not need to do this. The OSHA provides a list of exempted industries, but most employers that have 10 or more employees have to do record keeping, which is meaning keeping track of their injuries and illnesses that occur and posting a summary of those from February to April every year. What I've done is I've included a link because also even small businesses under 10 need to have two things: an emergency action plan and a fire prevention plan. And I've included a link to so that you can take a look at what these include and get some templates. And basically kind of think through, what would I do if there were a fire in my building? What would I do if there's an emergency? One of the things that OSHA wants to see on your emergency action plan, unfortunately, is a plan for how you would handle workplace violence. And so I really encourage you to think this through. And if you've got employees who are teleworking, may not be an issue, but if you're in the office, you really need to have a plan of action for what you would do if there's an emergency or a fire. And you can use this link to get some templates to help get you started. So I know that a lot of this is a little bit dry information, but it really is information that can save you from a lot of headaches down the road. One of the big things that I get questions on is, what does at will mean? A lot of people think that at will and right to work are the same thing, but right to work has to do with unions. At will has to do with employment contracts. That's it. Let me tell you, a lot of times I've worked with managers who say, I'm going to fire this person and I don't care if, if they sue me or not, because this is an at-will state and they can't sue me. Well, here's the problem is that at-will really has to do with employment contracts. If you're breaking the law in terms of any other things like employment laws, overtime compensation, contractors versus employees, you can still get sued and get taken to the bank, literally, over that. So at-will does not provide you protection against getting sued for violations of law. What it does is it says that you don't have a contract to keep an employee with you for any period of time. So the way that happens is, a lot of small businesses are very future oriented. And when they're talking with a candidate, they might send them an email and say, if this business grows like I think it's going to grow, you could be vice president of operations by this time next year, right? That it can be construed to be a promise of employment. And so this time next year, business doesn't go quite as planned. And the person comes back and says, wait a minute, I thought I was going to be your VP of operations this year. And that creates a headache for you, because it makes it look like that you made a contract with them to keep them employed. So whether you're doing an offer letter, a handbook, email, or even just talking with someone in an interview over coffee or whatever, don't make any kind of promises for future employment. On offer letters, I'm going to tell you, we'll talk about how to put some offer letters together here later on in the presentation, but there's some secret sauce on how to put your offer letters together. So when it comes to posters, a lot of people spend a lot of money getting these huge laminated posters, and they include everything in the kitchen sink. But as a small business, that's really not necessary. Here are the federal posters that are required. There's only 3 posters that are required by state law. And so you can click on this link and it'll take you over to where you can basically just print and put in a common area. Some people are paperless, or maybe they're teleworking. So maybe if you've got like Google Drive or OneDrive, maybe you could have your posters to where your employees have access to them. And so really the posters, there's really not that many required. On the OSHA, you do have to print it in color and in legal size. So that's the worst one. Everything else is just really straightforward, and I don't personally see a need to pay $100 for something that I can get for free, especially when I'm a small business starting out, or if I've got employees teleworking and they're not in the office. So let's talk about an employee handbook. Do you need to have one? And the answer is no. If you are a small business, especially under 15, you don't need an entire handbook. They can be helpful, but for a small business that's got 3 to 5 employees, or maybe even 10 employees, a handbook could be overkill for you. What you might really need is just some really well-written key policies that are applicable to your industry. If your industry has specific requirements, or if you're finding that you're having problems with a particular issue with employees, like maybe attendance, for example, or they're not wearing their uniforms, you provide a uniform and they're not wearing their uniforms correctly, or they're coming in all wrinkly, well, then you can go ahead and create a key policy and provide that to employees, as opposed to feeling obligated to create this entire masterpiece Handbook. The key thing is just be consistent in how you treat your employees once you do introduce your policies. So here are some ideas of key policies. I always like to see a substance abuse policy. One time, more than once, I've seen people test positive for drugs and win unemployment claims because a company does not have a substance abuse policy. So I really highly recommend a substance abuse policy with a testing consent. If you have issues with attendance, include that. If you provide any property to your employees, like testing kits or keys or codes or laptops, phones, whatever, I think you need to have a company property policy to make sure that they know that they need to keep that in good shape. They need to not lose it. They need to be responsible for it. And if they leave the company, they need to return it. I want to see everyone have a safety policy. Just a basic safety policy is all that's necessary. You can go to the OSHA website and get some ideas for putting together just a brief safety policy, just basically showing that you as a business, that you care about safety and that you don't allow things like rough housing or any kind of unsafe practices on behalf of the employees. Let's say that you have employees who drive and that you reimburse them mileage, or you give them some sort of gas stipend. Maybe you issue company credit cards or fuel cards to your employees. Then you're going to want to have a business expense policy. And at the end of the presentation, I'm going to show you a link where you can go grab several of these for free from a TWC's website and start putting together whatever key policies that you need for yourself. On the key policy, I just want to let you know that a drug-free workplace policy is not the same as a substance abuse policy. Those are two separate policies. The drug-free policy just says we don't tolerate drug use, right? And a lot of contractors are required to have that information in their policies. But a substance abuse policy gives you the right to drug test. Drug-free workplace does not give you the right to drug test. And so if you're not a contractor, I don't even see a need for you to even have a drug-free workplace policy in your handbook or in your key policies. What you need is substance abuse, so that you can attest upon hire randomly if there's a safety incident or a reasonable suspicion, like someone comes in acting all wonky and glassy-eyed and smelling of alcohol. I want you, at least 2 witnesses to verify what they're seeing, and then I want you to go drive them to take a drug test. Don't give them their keys and go, hey, go down and take a drug test. They'll have an accident on the way down. But if you have reasonable suspicion, the substance abuse policy allows you to send someone for a drug test. And I've seen that more than once. And so just know that these are 2 different policies, and this substance abuse policy is what you really want to be paying attention to. So here are some examples of new hire forms. Number 1, you have the I-9, which is within 3 days. You have the W-4 form, which is taxes. I like to see a substance abuse policy with a consent. Key policies, all with at-will statements. The deduction authorization is a critical document, and I'm going to show it to you here in a sec. The healthcare exchange notice, I gave you a link to it, that is required by the ACA. And the workers' compensation notice I also gave you a link, that is required by the state of Texas. So here's the beginning of your orientation checklist. And I will show you an example of an orientation checklist here in a minute. But when I go to talk about payroll systems, we're going to revisit a couple of these because there's some shortcuts for you. So the reason why it's so tempting to hire everybody as a contractor is because you don't have to pay taxes. Look at this. Both the employer, ER means employer and EE means employee. Both the employer and the employee have to pay Social Security and Medicare, which together are referred to as FICA. So if you hear FICA, you'll know that that's what that means. You also have to pay federal unemployment and state unemployment. If you're a new employer, you will be set automatically at 2.7%. And you as the employer are the one that pays that tax. Once you've been in business for a couple of years, that rate should come down if you don't experience a lot of layoffs. You can watch my TWC Decoded webinar that is on the SBDC's YouTube channel, and I talk all about unemployment. It's called TWC Decoded. So go watch that if you've had any issues with unemployment or your rate is too high. So let's talk about common pitfalls. Remember we said that a lot of these employment laws don't apply. What employers mainly do that get themselves in trouble are these pitfalls, and we're going to talk about these. So you're gambling. You are literally throwing the dice when you choose to put someone on contract, unless they belong there. What happens is that it's super easy just to try when you're in a small business to put everybody on contract. But all you have to do is get busted once and you're going to be into some serious trouble. So I'm going to show you at the end of the presentation a little cheat sheet that helps you decide between whether or not somebody is a W-2 employee or a 1099 contractor. And by the way, there's no such thing as a contract employee. They're either an employee or a contractor. There's no such thing as a 1099 employee. That is a contractor. W-2 is employee. So I'll share a cheat sheet with you after the presentation. The other thing is salary exemption. Most employees do not meet that requirement. So here's some of the requirements. One is that they have a degree. Another is that they supervise 2 or more employees. Also, they have to make, I think it's close to 36,000. There's an exact dollar figure that they have to make before you can put them on salary. So if you have somebody who's making $25,000 a year, they in no way meet that requirement. And so what I've done is I've included a link to a little fact sheet. It's a cheat sheet, and you can go through and say, okay, does my employee qualify to be on salary? And if in doubt, just put them on an hourly basis. Don't take that chance. All it takes is one complaint to the Department of Labor, and they come in and they do an audit, and they go back 2 years. They look at all your payroll records, your employees, everything for the past 2 years, and scrub it to see what else you may be doing wrong. And that's exactly what you do not want. So it's not worth rolling the dice on these 2 things. Just make sure that you get it right the first time. Overtime laws. A lot of small businesses hate overtime. They do the averaging, or they figure out any way that they can avoid overtime. But like I said, you determine your work week. So that's the one little card that you have in the back of your pocket that you can use to say, okay, can I rearrange my work week so that I can send employees home on a slow day? Your work week can be anything. It could be Wednesday through Tuesday, Thursday through Wednesday, Monday through Sunday. A lot of small businesses use Sunday through Saturday because that's just what they're used to from corporate America. But what if you've got employees who are on call on the weekend? If they get a call and they've already worked 40 hours Monday through Friday, you are going to owe them overtime for any on-calls that they do. And so if that is becoming a burden for you, or you think that might be a burden, rearrange your work week so that if an employee works overtime over the weekend, you can send them home early on Monday. You can do a Tuesday through Monday work week. Send people home on Monday if that's your slow day, and that helps control your overtime. So you have options. If you have paid time off benefits or vacation sick leave, that you will want to have a policy for that. And you want to make sure that you say in there that it does not count towards overtime. Because some people expect that if they go on vacation for 8 hours, that if any of that kicks over 40, that you owe them overtime on the vacation pay, and that's not what I recommend. Let me just say that. So Texas Payday is the main payday law, the main employer law for the state of Texas. It's administered by TWC. And so if an employer does any kind of illegal garnishments or deductions without authorization, if they have disputes over commissions or bonuses, employees go to Texas, to TWC, and they file what's called a wage claim under the Texas Payday Law. And so what you want to make sure is that the main thing you want to make sure is that you get their signature on a deduction authorization. Let me give you an example of this that happens way too often. Let's pretend like that when you hire an employee that you give them some tools. Let's say they're a mechanic and you give them some tools so that they can do their job, but they leave the job and they keep the tools. So you say, that's fine, I'm just going to deduct the value of those tools from your final paycheck. Guess what? You're out of luck. That person can go and file a wage claim and you will have to pay them. You will have to give them their last check. Okay? And then they get to keep your tools on top of that. I've seen that way too often. I've seen businesses say, well, look, when you return the tools, then we will give you your final check. Under the state of Texas, if somebody voluntarily leaves the company, you owe them their check on the next payday. If you fire them, you owe it within 6 days, 6 calendar days. And so you cannot play around with that. You can't be, it's almost like a bad poker game. I'll see your check and raise you, give me my tools back, right? So what I'm going to do is at the end of the presentation, I'm going to show you what you need to get them to sign to be able to withhold from their check, including their final check. All right. So just be aware that a lot of businesses, when they give out equipment, whether it's tools, laptops, phones, whatever, if employees keep them, you're going to be on the hook unless you follow my directions, which I will give you at the end. So what I recommend is for every small business to go to what's called the Texas Conference for Business Employers. I've got the link here. It used to be like, I don't know, like $100. I think they raised the price to $120, but it's 8 hours of just pure golden information about how to be an employer in Texas. They have attorneys there that you can go up and say, ask them questions. this is worth its weight in gold. During COVID, they were doing it on Zoom, but they've actually started in-person conferences again, and they go all over the state. They have conferences in the Houston area, the Dallas area, the San Antonio area, El Paso area, all over the state of Texas. So click this link, see where the next one is that's closest to you, and sign up for it. The other thing I want you to take a look at is what's called especially for Texas employers. I'm going to go over this at the very end because this is where you're going to get a lot of your free key policies. Remember, we talked about you don't necessarily have to have a handbook. Well, believe it or not, the state of Texas provides a lot of templates for you that all you have to do is copy and paste. And that's what it's there for. So use it. We'll talk about that at the very end, and I'll show you how to use it. So this is my contact information. If I have royally confused you, you're welcome to contact me. But what I'd like to see you do is check out the website for North Central Texas SBDC and sign up and get an advisor. Watch some of the other YouTube presentations that I've given, and then you will be able to access some of these tools. Your advisor might be able to send you a copy of the slide deck, some of these samples that I'm going to share with you in a second. You can get those from your advisor. Like I said, I am a customer. I have an advisor, so I'm not just saying this as a presenter. I'm saying that I'm a customer, and I love my advisor so much I ain't giving her name out anymore. So you're just gonna have to forget that, because I don't want to have to wait 2 months to get on her calendar. Okay, so can you blame me? So now what I want to do is, now I'm sharing my screen. I want to share with you some samples, some cheat sheets. So here is the cheat sheet for comparing employees versus contractors. I want to show you how this works. See where it says 1, instructions. An employee receives instructions about when, where, and how the work is to be performed. An independent contractor does the job their own way with few, if any, instructions. All right. And so this is published by TWC, 20 points. Let me show you where the big ones are, okay? Not just instructions, training. Who does the training? If you have to send somebody to training to do their job, they're an employee. Let's look at number 14, furnishing tools. If you have to furnish tools like laptops or whatever else to your employees to do their job, they're an employee, because a contractor pays for their own tools, their own materials, their own equipment, their own training. So if you're paying for that, then that's an employee. What I have seen is that some employers will actually rent equipment. So they'll provide equipment, but they'll charge them a little bit of rent for the equipment. And then that can start leaning more towards contractor. But if you're just outright providing it, that's an employee. Google got into big trouble because they say at least 50% of Google's work is done by contractors, and Google is providing medical benefits for contractors, and they got totally busted. The Department of Labor said, look, if you are providing insurance, they are an employee, not a contractor. Now pay up. It was frightening, actually. But that's what I want to say. If you're issuing medical benefits, tools, training, and it's an employee, not a contractor. Let's look number 6, continuing relationship. If somebody has worked for you and done the same job for the last 5 years, they're going to be an employee. Contractors may come and go. Now, maybe there's an exception, like you have an accountant, but that accountant, they're the expert. They have their own company, their own clients, and so they can be a contractor. And what they do as a business isn't the same as yours. What happens is if you have, let me give you an example. Once upon a time, before this client was my client, they did speech therapy, and they hired all of their employees as contractors. One person filed an unemployment claim. TWC went back and audited everything for the last, I don't know how long, and they came back and said, all of these people that you have on contract are and should have been employees because you provided them with the tools, the equipment, the training, you gave them reimbursements for their cell phones, and it was so painful just because of one person. And so I want you, this is available on the website I'm going to share with you, so you can download it from there. I also included a link up earlier in the presentation. So if you want to get a copy of this, you just click on the link under TWC that I gave you earlier at the top of the presentation, and you can get it. Look through this, and if you're not sure, hire the person as an employee, because you do not want to get into the middle of an audit, because it usually does not go well for the employer. Here's another sample. This is called the deduction authorization, and this is what you need to have employees sign in order to do deductions. Remember, we talked about tools. Well, tools can be something that you can collect, or somebody misuses a company credit card. These are different reasons why you're legally able to deduct from an employee's check. Now, just so you know, you are not allowed to deduct garnishments unless you have a court order. So like child support is okay. Student loans can be garnished, but take a look at this and see, and at the end of the presentation, I'll show you where you can get a copy of this, and then you can kind of update yourself. One of the things that I added is if somebody borrows paid time off or vacation in advance and then they leave the company, then you can deduct it from their final check, because that happens a lot. People will borrow in advance and then leave the company, and then you're on the hook. So this is one of the most important documents that you need to have your employees sign. And so I'm going to ask you a question. When do you get your employees to sign all this stuff? Give you a couple seconds to think about that. When do you get them to sign this or any of the other policies? You get them to sign it on day 1. And the reason why I say kind of facetiously is because that's the nicest they're ever going to be to you again. They will sign anything on their, thank you, Lori, day 1. Because 30 days from now, they're going to be like, why are you having me sign this? Let me go check with my lawyer. I don't know. I don't like this statement. So on day 1, you get all the information, all the signatures that you need. Don't mess around with it. Don't wait. Rip it like a Band-Aid. So here's another form I want to share with you. And this is just something I put together. It's not available on TWC, but it is in Word. So you can take this and edit it according to whatever you want to do. I'm going to go through this. I-9 has to be done within 3 days, and the W-4 also has to be done. There's not a deadline on it, but do it right away. So here's what I tell my clients: get a good payroll system. If you don't go cheap, right? If you're with, and it doesn't matter who you're with, whether you do QuickBooks Payroll, Gusto, Paychecks, whatever it is that you do, get this system that will do this for you paperlessly. What I like to do is you send an email to the employee to invite them to set up an account in the system, and they complete the I-9 and the W-4 online on your payroll system, so you don't have to mess around with it. And you will want to get copies, or not get copies, but see their documents within 3 days. So like if they have a passport or driver's license or whatever, you'll want to view those within 3 days. Before COVID, you had to view them in person, but because of COVID, they've kind of backed off, and they will accept copies. And so somebody can just snap a copy at this point, copy of their driver's license and social security card, and send it to you. Do the I-9 on the payroll system and you're done. So that sounds good to me. You might want to have an attendance policy. Again, I highly recommend substance abuse, but it's not required. Deduction authorization, highly recommend, not required, but best practice for sure. Workers' compensation notice is required by the state of Texas. Healthcare exchange notice is required by the ACA. And so what you might want to do is get this sample checklist from your advisor, and then just go through and add, like if you don't need an attendance policy, but you need a company property policy, well then just erase it, fix it up, add it, take it away, whatever you need to do. This is just one page, but you can add to it. You see over here where it says initials? That is not your initials. That is the employee's initials. I don't want to see a check mark on here. I don't want to see your check mark, their check mark. This is their initials that they have received all of these things. Some systems that you use, payroll systems, if you pay for a little bit higher level system, they will actually allow you to upload all your own policies and forms, and your employees can sign all these things electronically. But this is, if you are doing orientation in person, this might be, as a small business, just a starting sample for you to get going. So we still have a little bit of time, and I want to show you the Texas. I want to show you this freebie site that is golden. Okay. Sorry, I gotta scroll. Here we go. This one. This is called Especially for Texas Employers. This is your new best friend, okay? So this is the way it looks. Can everybody see it? I think I'm sharing my entire screen. So this is a website published by TWC for Texas employers. And what I like is, like, see where it says A to Z of personnel policies? You click on that and look, you can get a bunch of free policies. The deduction authorization agreement, I already showed it to you. You can copy and paste this and kind of make it your own. Let's see, job offer letter. How about this? Right, a template for that. Yay. Property return security deposit agreement. Yay for that. If you're issuing really expensive stuff to your employees. What else? Authorization for background check. Super simple. By the way, you can no longer just have someone sign an application and without getting their signature on a separate form to do a background check. Just so you know, used to, you could get them to sign the application and you were done. Attendance policy. There's several different attendance policy templates for you. This is a very simple one. So might work for you, might not. Oh, this is one of my favorites. Neutral absence control policies. And there's a sample for you. I'll show it to you. But what this says is that, you know, when employees don't give proper notice for taking off work, they get kind of a demerit. It's kind of like a point system. And after so many points, they can get into disciplinary action. And so I like that because you're not getting into their personal life too much and saying, why were you not here? You're just saying, look, you know, you didn't give proper notice for taking time off, and so you're gonna get a point for that. You always have the right, like if somebody has an emergency and you think it's legitimate, you always have the right to override that. But by and large, if you've got attendance issues, then you're going to want to have an attendance policy. Relationships in the workplace. You know, back when Me Too was really hot, employers were having people sign love contracts. So if two employees were involved with each other romantically in the workplace, the company would have them sign a love contract saying that it was mutually consensual, right? Just to cover themselves, because they didn't want the relationship to end and then one person claims sexual harassment against the other. And so I like this. I think, you know, if you're big enough that you've got relationships in the workplace, like two people dating, then this might be a good one for you. Now, you can see that there's a whole bunch of policies here. I'm not going to go over them. I give you the link to this in the slide deck. It's called Especially for Texas Employers, but I like this other one that says index, right? And so on the index, to me, it makes it a little bit easier. So like with contractors, you can go, okay, how do I know what a contractor is? This is the IRS. This is the IRS 11 points, which I hate. It's confusing. And here's the Texas Workforce version that I just shared with you, 20 points. So if you need to get a copy of this, you can just click here, done, and go through and just do a checklist. Does this apply to me or not? And that helps guide your decision. Another thing is confidentiality. Let's say that you have got confidential information. Conflict of interest is in here somewhere too. Conflict of interest, trade secrets. So this gives you information and gives you a policy, I believe, in here. I lost track of it, but it's in here somewhere. So can you see how much there is? Back to the top. Wages, wage overpayment, wage in lieu of notice, gives you weapons at work. This is an important one because if you don't allow weapons at work, then you need to make that known. Just so you know that the law has changed and that you do not have to have a concealed carry license to keep a firearm in your personal locked vehicle. So if you've got an employee that parks on your property, on your parking lot, and they have a gun locked in their car, that is legal. They do not have to have a special license for that. Welcome to Texas, right? Workers' compensation in here gives you a lot of good information so that you can go, okay, what should I do? The TDI notice is here too. This is what I was saying is required by the state of Texas. And so, what was one of them? We did the deduction authorization. Did we look at that? This is it. I forget if I showed this to you, but this is copy and paste, or you can edit according to what works for you. And drug and alcohol policies, I think this is super important. See, you as the business owner, you may not know how to put together a consent to test, but here it is, right? So you copy and paste, you get your employee to sign this on day one, and it gives you the right to drug test them. You don't have to get this signed every time that you go to send them for a drug test. You know, I mean, it's a good idea, but it's not, as long as you get them to sign it once, then you're okay. But if you don't want to lose an unemployment claim, then you better make sure that you've got a substance abuse policy and their signature. So drug and alcohol policies, there's several of them here. Adopt a written policy, right? So you literally can copy and paste and create a policy, put it on your orientation checklist, get them to sign the consent to be tested form, and you're covered. Is there anything else I can go over? You can actually order this, and some people like the written version. It's really handy. What you do is you click on here and it sends an email, and they will mail you a hard copy of this. And I like it because it's spiral bound, so it makes it really easy to look through. And it's almost like the HR Bible for the state of Texas. And so if you prefer to have things on paper, or if you want to go look at something real quick, grab it off your bookshelf and take a look at it real quick, then click this link, email it, and they'll send it to you for free. So do we have any other questions or comments? I'm going to close this out. This is golden right here. These two things right here are as a small business are free resources that will help keep you out of trouble. What I did is I just kind of gave you a highlight, and I included some federal laws that you're going to want to pay attention to. We may be running out of time here, but here's the healthcare model notice here. So for example, if you model notice for those who offer coverage, you can do it in Word format. Model notice for employers who do not offer health insurance, and this is what's required by the ACA, even for small businesses. And so this is what I include on my orientation checklist is these two things: the workers' compensation notice, which is required by Texas, the healthcare exchange notice, which is required by the ACA. Even if you don't have 50 employees, you are required to let them know whether or not you provide insurance. So we went over so much information. I'm hoping that you do not have, maybe I need to like offer some Excedrin to go with this particular presentation. But what I'm hoping is not that you have memorized everything that we went over. What I'm hoping is that if something comes up, it'll trigger you to go back and go, oh, wait, we went over that. Let me go look at that to make sure I'm doing it right. Or go back to the resources that I provided you to say, okay, wait, let me just make sure that I've got all my bases covered. So, a lot of resources are provided for you here. If you want what I call cheat sheets, I shouldn't say that as HR. If you want the samples, then get with your advisor. The samples will be distributed to your advisors so that they can send them to you for free. And again, get on the TWC's website. If you need a policy, then go and look and see if you can grab one off of their website and use it without you having to call an attorney or try and handwrite something yourself. Why not use the resources that were already provided there for you for free? So do we have any questions or comments? I know this is one of those presentations where it's just so much information. But like I said, I don't expect you to memorize it, but I do hope that there'll be a little trigger. If something comes up, you'll scratch your head and say, wait a minute, CJ said something about that. Let me go to that website and just double check to make sure I'm doing it right. So do we have any questions, comments?
It looks like Brett may have a question. I have a few, but I'll let Brett go.
Okay, Brett, you first.
Well, that was sweet of you. Thank you so much, CJ, for all this great information. And yes, it's a little bit deep, and obviously it can get much deeper. And for those of us who are not human resources experts like yourselves, I just want to say thank you for making it a little bit clearer. If I get this right, if I was a small business owner focused on my new hires, by using that list you created and the links that you provided with more information should I need it, we'll just call it like that. But if I use the list, the checklist, to make sure there's one, and the Texas Workforce Commission has some really good stuff there to detail it out. As long as I have that stuff as a small business owner and not necessarily having my own human resources department full of people that know all this already, if I focus on that and get everybody to sign it when they come in, based on what mine is, at least I would have a file for each of the employees. Maybe there's only 3 employees, maybe there's 10, but that's sort of where some of the small businesses are. Then I would pretty much be covered as far as giving good information for somebody in a small business there to make sure that they stay
Yes.
compliant.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Brett. You just boiled it down to its bare essentials, and I appreciate that because this is a lot of information. But if you use the orientation checklist and couple that with this TWC website that provides additional policies that you could just pop in, then you provide a ton of protection for your small business, and you know what to do when you hire a new employee. You know what to go over. Right?
Oh,
And so
thank you.
you.
No,
Thank you.
thank you.
Take those 2 things. If the checklist married the TWC website, their baby would be a very good compliant business, small business. So thank you for that.
That was a great comment, Brett. Thank you so much. I have a question about that, the 40-hour work week and changing up the work week and all of that. You said something about using the alternative work week and possibly sending people home as opposed to getting into an overtime situation. Is that what I understood?
That is absolutely correct. You determine your work week, and it can be anything. But what I don't want to see is that the end of your work week is your busiest day of the week, because then you have no choice but to let your employees work and then to ching on your overtime. So yes, they have the option to alter their work week so that they can send employees home once they start bumping into that 40 hours. Communicate that with your employees, let them know. In fact, overtime policies say that they're not allowed to work overtime over 40 hours unless it's been pre-approved by their manager.
Okay. So
And
would that be someone who has already, if they're already at their 40 hours?
yes, exactly. Somebody who's already out there 40 hours, then you can send them home. And if
Gotcha.
you need them to, yes. What you don't want to do is send people home on your busiest day of the week, because you need them to service your clients.
Right, right, right.
Mhm.
So on the exempt versus non-exempt, if you have a non-exempt employee, maybe an admin, can that admin actually have direct reports?
Yes, they can. Yes, they can. So let's say that you have an admin supervisor who supervises other administrative assistants. Then they may qualify to be on salary because they are supervising. But if you've got an admin that just does admin, doesn't supervise, doesn't have a degree, doesn't, you know what I mean? They just do the work, then they would need to be hourly. But that's a good question. If you've got like an admin supervisor who supervises 2 or more employees, then that's one of the ways that you can put somebody on salary. Good
Okay.
question.
Okay. Talk to me about the difference between an attendance policy and an attendance guideline.
So an attendance guideline doesn't have a lot of meat to it. Attendance policy is something that you can terminate someone under. So if someone is just can't show up for work, or they constantly call in, right? Call in at the last minute under an attendance policy, not a guideline, attendance policy, then you can go ahead and start writing them up and eventually terminate them if they don't turn things around. Because here's what happens is somebody gets terminated for poor attendance. They go and they file a claim with TWC, an unemployment claim. And if you don't have a policy in place that you fired them under, then you lose.
Okay.
Right? So if you think that attendance is going to be an issue in your business, do a policy, not a guideline, a policy, so that if somebody is not, showing up to work on time, then you can get rid of them.
Okay. Can you write into that policy something that will allow case-by-case review?
Absolutely. Every single policy needs to say that the manager can approve or disregard an absence.
Okay.
And so, absolutely, because you might have an employee that has special circumstances, like, maybe they've got a sick child, and they're genuinely sick. Well, you're not going to want to be the person to fire someone who has a genuinely sick kiddo. And so you can override that. Absolutely.
And one last question, because it was told to me and it didn't click. I didn't understand the statement. Can an employer expect an employee to be at work all the time? I mean, on their scheduled hours every day that they're scheduled to work?
Yes, and so absolutely, and that's the whole point, is that you've got a business to run. So if you've got an employee that's continually showing up late or not giving proper notice, so that you can backfill their position, then you can do the disciplinary process and get rid of them. And that's that no fault attendance policy that I was talking about. And you can determine in your no fault attendance policy how much notice you need. Do you need 3 days notice, 1 day notice, 1 week, 2 weeks notice for request for time off? And you can say how many points that they could get. Like you could say, if you get more than 3 points in a 2-month period, then you're eligible for disciplinary action. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's completely up to you how you want to define proper notice in the point system and the disciplinary. But the no fault policy gives you a starting point. I would look that up on TWCs and use that.
Okay, that's great information. Thank you so much. Any
Very
further?
welcome. Yeah, and
questions?
expecting employees to show up for work, yes, that is okay.
Isn't that
You have the right, especially as a small business, because you don't have a bunch of other employees to backfill for that one employee that never shows up to work, right?
exactly? I could not believe when somebody told me that. And I went, really? Okay,
Yes. No, as a small business, you need your employees there.
exactly, exactly.
Awesome. Good questions.
So I have one question. It's related to the overtime. And if an employee in their defined work week, is say they used a vacation day or a sick day, but then they ended up working hours, the rest of that week that ended up all calculated to over 40 hours, but you still had 8 hours of sick time or vacation time. Are you responsible for those overtime hours?
No. In the state of Texas, by default, vacation, sick, any paid time off benefits do not count towards overtime. Holiday pay, for example. That can happen too. Let's say you have a holiday on Monday and then Tuesday through Friday, you work 40 hours. Well, what you would owe them is 8 hours of holiday plus 40 straight hours, not 8 hours of overtime. Now, but having said that, Lori, if you do have a time off policy, I think you should state point blank in that policy, number one, that it doesn't count towards overtime, and number two, whether or not you're going to pay out unused benefits. Because I'm not a fan of small businesses paying out unused time off benefits, because that can create huge cash flow issues. So although in the state of Texas, you don't necessarily have to say that they don't count towards overtime, Texas that's the default. I would anyway. And I would say not just that, but whether or not you're going to pay it out if they leave it with a balance. And my personal answer would be no, but everybody's different.
Well, so for that, you pay for that week, certainly you pay them for the time that they worked and their holiday time, but it would be at straight time, not the time and a half or anything else. Okay.
Exactly. You pay them their 8 hours of, let's say, holiday on Monday, and then the 40 straight hours that they worked Tuesday through Friday, and you're compliant, not time and a half.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. See, it gets complicated. HR can be a little complicated.
It can get a little hairy. It definitely can that.
So,
CJ, thank you so much. This is a topic always near and dear to my heart, but these are some valuable resources you've provided for us. I did not know all of this existed. But this is, like, as you said, it's gold. This is some gold.
yeah, you don't need to hire an attorney or even an HR expert. Use the services that have been provided to you for free, like your SBDC advisor and TWC. And Brett was right. Take the checklist and marry it with the policies that TWC provides you, and you're good. You're off and running.
Thank you. And thank you for saying that. I love it. Do you want to say it again? Brett was right. Is that what you said?
Made a really good point.
Thank you so much.
If you didn't hear it, rewind your YouTube and listen to it again because this is a really good point. It keeps it simple.
Oh, such a fisherman, such a fisherman. Um, we appreciate all that you've shared with us. It is some really wonderful information. I just want to remind everyone that you'll be getting a survey. And if you would please spend a short time completing this survey, let us know how we can improve our program. We would love your feedback. Just want to point out that we have some upcoming webinars. You can see them on your screen. Tomorrow we have a continuation of our QuickBooks series, Bank Rules in QuickBooks. I'm looking forward to hearing about that. Then next, we take spring break off, and that following week we have taking the cryptic out of cryptocurrency and building a high quality email list. And following a couple of days later, we have budgets in QuickBooks and part 2 of building a high quality email list. Really looking forward to these webinars. Great information. And you can actually access these webinars. You can register for these webinars by accessing our website at sbdc.nctc.edu. There you can also find contact information for our center. You can schedule an appointment with an advisor and look at all of the resources that we have already existing out there on our website. If you would like to register for our webinars, you can also use the QR code in the upper right-hand corner of that slide, and that will take you to the registration. We would like to thank our funding partners. Our benefactors, we are very grateful to them, the Small Business Administration, the state of Texas, North Texas SBDC Regional Office, and North Central Texas College, our host. Thank you all for joining us today. We hope you've enjoyed the information that you've heard and will access our YouTube channel to review this webinar again and again. Thank you for joining us, and we will go ahead and end the webinar. Thanks so much.
Thank you.